LLULLAILLACO, the hair that remembered. She was 13 years old. She'd been dead for 500 years. Scientists cut her hair into millimeter segments and analyzed each one. What came back was a diary. 2 years of herbs, 2 years of numbness. And the exact week her terror became chemical, a cortisol spike so violent it was still legible in her keratin 5 centuries later. The Inca buried her on the summit of a volcano, holy leaves between her teeth, in a posture everyone who found her described the same way. Peaceful. Her hair says otherwise. In March 1999, an expedition led by the American archaeologist Johann Reinhard reached the summit of LLULLAILLACO, a dormant volcano on the Argentine-Chilean border, rising into air so thin it holds half the oxygen of sea level. Nothing grows at 6,739 meters. Nothing survives, and nothing was supposed to be found there. 3 children were buried just below the peak, in a stone-lined platform beneath the surface. A girl of approximately 13, seated cross-legged, her braids perfectly intact. A girl of 4 or 5, sitting upright with her arms drawn across her chest. A boy of approximately the same age, hunched forward, legs folded beneath him. They were not skeletons. They were not fragments. They were whole. Skin, hair, fingernails, eyelashes, organs, blood. The 13-year-old still had holy leaves pressed between her teeth. The boy's clothing carried dried traces of vomit and blood. The younger girl's face was darkened by scarring, the result of a lightning strike that reached her burial centuries after death, burning the surface but leaving the frozen interior untouched. The cold had done what no embalming technique in the ancient world could replicate. 500 years of unbroken sub-zero temperatures had frozen these children so completely that their organs could be examined with the same tools used on a body found that morning. CT scanning, biochemical analysis, DNA extraction. But the science that would crack this case open did not arrive for another decade. The Inca called the ritual capacocha, royal obligation. Children were selected from across the empire, prepared over months or years, and taken to the highest summits the Inca could reach and killed. Strangulation, blunt force, exposure. The children at LLULLAILLACO appear to have died by the last of these, sedated beyond consciousness, placed in their burial postures, and left for the cold to finish. The Spanish chroniclers documented capacocha with horror. Modern accounts have inherited that tone. The word sacrifice carries an implicit verdict, a civilization too primitive to see the killing of children as wrong. But the forensic evidence complicates that narrative in ways far more disturbing than simple condemnation allows. These children were not seized in a frenzy. They were managed, and the proof is written in the most unlikely archive imaginable: the hair on a dead girl's head. Human hair grows at approximately 1 centimeter per month. As it grows, it incorporates chemical traces of everything circulating in the bloodstream: food metabolites, herb compounds, alcohol markers, hormones. Each centimeter is a frozen record of what was happening inside the body during the weeks it was formed. Cut the hair into sequential segments and analyze each one, and what emerges is a timeline, a calendar, a biochemical autobiography that the person never chose to write. In 2013, a team led by University of Bradford archaeologist Andrew Wilson did exactly this to La Doncella's hair. Using mass spectrometry, they analyzed segments spanning the final 2 years of her life. What the data produced was not a snapshot. It was a film, played in slow motion, frame by frame, revealing a process so deliberate that the word ritual begins to feel inadequate. What the hair describes is a protocol. For most of her earlier life, La Doncella's chemical profile was unremarkable, consistent with a standard Inca agricultural diet: potatoes, maize, modest protein, minimal leaf, minimal alcohol. She was, biochemically, an ordinary girl from an ordinary community somewhere in the highlands of the Inca Empire. Then, approximately 24 months before her death, the profile shifted. Leaf metabolites began to climb, not sporadically, not in isolated spikes, but in a sustained, escalating arc that continued without reversal for the remainder of her life. 12 months before death, the levels had increased several times over. In the final weeks, they were enormous, concentrations consistent with continuous, heavy leaf consumption, far exceeding anything seen in normal dietary or ceremonial use. Alcohol followed the same trajectory. Chicha, the fermented maize beer central to Inca ritual life, appeared in the hair record at progressively higher concentrations. By the end, the levels indicate she was being kept in a state approaching permanent numbness. Not drunk, managed. Her neurochemistry was being controlled by people who understood exactly what these substances did and administered them on a schedule. And then the cortisol. Cortisol is not a dose. It cannot be given. It is the body's own signature of sustained psychological distress, the hormone the adrenal glands release when the system detects a threat it cannot escape. In the final weeks of La Doncella's life, her cortisol concentrations rose to levels the researchers described as remarkable. The stress was not acute, it was chronic, escalating, and it mapped precisely onto the period when the leaf and chicha dosages were at their highest. The interpretation is difficult to avoid. She was being altered more heavily because she needed to be, because she was afraid. And the fear was not a single spike of panic. It was weeks of sustained, building terror. The biochemical signature of a girl who understood what was happening and could not stop it. Her body wrote that understanding into the only medium available to it, and the medium survived 5 centuries of ice, waiting for a mass spectrometer to read it. The 2 younger children tell a different biochemical story, and the difference is as revealing as the parallel. Their hair was analyzed with identical methods. Leaf and chicha metabolites were present in both, elevated in the months before death, confirming that all 3 underwent the same ritual preparation. But the increases were less dramatic, the timeline shorter, the escalation less steep. They were being prepared but with less intensity, less duration, less chemical management, and their cortisol did not spike. This does not necessarily mean they were not frightened. Cortisol measures chronic stress, the kind that accumulates over weeks when the threat is understood, but inescapable. A 4-year-old may experience acute fear without the sustained cognitive awareness that produces a prolonged cortisol elevation. The absence of the spike may not indicate calm. It may indicate incomprehension. They did not understand enough to produce the biochemical signature of dread. La Doncella was 13. She understood, and her hair is certain of it. CT scanning confirmed what the biochemistry had suggested and added what the hair could not provide. La Doncella's internal organs were virtually intact, lungs inflated, heart identifiable in cross-section. The holy leaves between her teeth had not been chewed. They were placed there as part of the final arrangement, a ritual gesture performed on a girl too subdued to resist or participate. Her posture was composed, deliberate, clearly positioned by other hands. This was not a body that had collapsed. It was a body that had been arranged. The boy's scan revealed something harder. Pulmonary edema, fluid in the lungs consistent with severe altitude sickness. The vomit and blood on his clothing confirmed it. A 4-year-old carried or walked to nearly 7,000 meters, struggling to breathe in air that barely sustained acclimatized adults. His body had been failing before the cold ever reached him. DNA analysis confirmed that the 3 children were not siblings. Different genetic backgrounds, different communities, different regions of the empire. Selected separately, brought together for the ritual. Buried together on a summit none of them had ever seen before the final climb. The temptation, when looking at the LLULLAILLACO children, is to locate the horror in the moment of death, the summit, the cold, the final unconsciousness. But the forensic evidence will not allow that simplification. The horror is not a moment. It is a duration. Capacocha was not a spontaneous act of religious violence. It was infrastructure, the identification of children, the negotiation with their communities, the chemical escalation over months, the logistical planning of the ascent, the construction of the burial platform. Every element speaks to a system with protocols, administrators, and institutional memory. This was not a priest seizing a child. This was a bureaucracy processing one. The hair proves the system. 24 months of escalating chemical data, too consistent to be accidental, recorded in the body of a girl who was simultaneously being honored and being destroyed. The leaf was not random. The chicha was not festive. They were tools of compliance, pharmacological instruments applied on a schedule, increased when the subject's distress required it, calibrated by people who had done this before and would do it again. This is what separates the LLULLAILLACO evidence from every other case in this series. Ötzi was killed in a single violent act. Tutankhamun's body recorded the accumulated weight of genetics and disease. The Romanovs were murdered in 20 minutes of chaos. Tolan Man was strangled and placed in a bog in what may have been a single night. La Doncella's death took 2 years. It began the day she was selected and did not end until the cold stopped her heart on the summit of a volcano that had been chosen, prepared, and sanctified specifically to receive her body. The 3 children are now housed at the Museum of High-Altitude Archaeology in Salta, Argentina, in climate-controlled cases that replicate the sub-zero temperatures the mountain provided for 5 centuries. Only one is shown at a time. Visitors describe the experience as unlike any other encounter with the ancient dead. There is no golden mask. There is no linen wrapping. There is no comfortable distance. There is only a girl, sitting cross-legged, head bowed, hands in her lap, looking by every human instinct like she is asleep. The Inca did not build the summit platform as a crime scene. They built it as a temple. In the framework of the empire that killed her, La Doncella was not a victim. She was a gift, selected for her health, her beauty, her perfection, and sent to live among the mountain gods forever. Her family was elevated. Her community was blessed. The capacocha was the highest honor the Inca state could bestow. The hair does not know this. The hair knows leaf metabolites rising for 24 months without interruption. It knows chicha reaching overpowering amounts in the final weeks. It knows cortisol spiking with a force that can only mean one thing, that the girl carrying it understood what was coming and could not make it stop. Every civilization tells itself a story about what it does to the ones it selects. The story is always beautiful. The Inca dressed theirs in the finest textiles ever woven, and carried it to the highest point they could reach, closer to the gods than any offering on earth. Science does not hear the story. It reads the hair. It counts the cortisol. It maps the leaf and the chicha, and the slow, systematic, 2-year escalation of a 13-year-old girl's enforced suppression. And it reports what it finds, without reverence, without condemnation, without the one thing every system that does this to a child requires in order to continue. A story that makes it sacred,